Hello and welcome to We Had Movies, and I'm your host Mo and
And, and Eric.
and Eric. All right, excellent. So today, what we're going to be talking about a movie that although it's about standing the test of time, I don't know if we're going to agree if it does stand the test of time as far as this movie goes. So the movie in question is Encino Man, and yeah, we're gonna chat about it. We'll get into the conversation. We'll summarize the film in a bit, and yeah, just wanted to mention in the meantime, before we go into that, we never really talked about the title before when we recorded. So just to have an understanding, because some people might be listening and thinking we had movies like and interpreting it in their own way, and it's fine. You can interpret it any way you want, because when I had come up with the title, I had been thinking, back in the day when I was growing up, what I had to grow up on was movies. So I grew up a lot on film, watching a lot of movies with my dad, watching movies
Absolutely.
with my family. So that was my interpretation of the title, and then you had Eric's interpretation.
Yeah, it was a very I agree with you. It's very much it's something we grew up on, getting a VHS, going to the Blockbuster or something like that, or if you're Canadian like us, the Jumbo Video. Um and it was a whole event, it was a whole thing. You made a whole thing out of it. Whether or not you were going to get dinner at the same time, like pizza or something like that. But it was a whole production, going to get a movie. Not like now where you're logging on to Netflix or Disney Plus or whatever your streaming platform of choice is, and just picking whatever movie you want and playing it. You had to be a little bit more discerning on what you wanted to get, because there was a limited amount of movies that you could, rent. You're not going to rent the whole store at a time. Um, Kind of like how you have entire libraries available at your disposal, just at your fingertips now. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, it was it was something else. I remember it fondly. Um, and it just is one of those memories that I have of my childhood.
Exactly. Yeah. And like another, just to go back to the title, I mean, we can think of it as like how we grew up on movies, how we had movies, and how we felt about growing up on film, and like learning a lot from movies as well, learning how to socialize, learning how to, um, I don't know, learning facts as we go as well, I guess we could say. And I think for me, the other thing was, I was going to say with the title was, we had movies also as another, you could look at it from a more like sarcastic sort of, it's like, well, we had movies but we don't really have movies anymore.
No, and,
Well,
and that's very true.
yeah.
I mean, to a certain degree. I mean, movies have definitely changed, um, not just in their subject matter, but how they get made, how they get funded. It's very much gone through a huge change in that landscape. So, the movies that we had back then are certainly not the same ones that are made now. So
No.
I mean, if you want to take a look at it from that perspective, it definitely holds true.
Yeah. I mean, there are still some movies that were just kind of made for fun, and they were an
Sure,
hour and a
sure.
half, and you know, they were just silly and just there, not necessarily to be the best movie of all time, but just there because it can be, and because it's funny, or because it's lighthearted, or whatever it may be, something to distract people with a story. And
Absolutely.
I think Encino Man kind of takes that sort of role. I think it becomes this film that is represents, I guess, a sort of nostalgia for certain adults, for certain people growing up in the 90s, people who like Polly
Right.
Shore. people who enjoyed, again, like physical comedy mostly more than the actual character development or anything like that.
Sure.
Yeah,
Something you want to just sit back and enjoy, not have to think too much about, right?
exactly. So that being said, yeah, let's get into the film and talk a little bit about it. So first of all, just to summarize the movie, um, and give you a little bit of a book report here. Oh, uh, we're still there? Yeah, okay, good.
Yep.
So the movie involves, um, well, it starts off with tribal drumming music leading into a scene where a man, assuming a man from the caveman era, which they don't specify necessarily the years in the film or anything like that. It's not a huge history
Yeah.
lesson here, but during the Ice Age, I guess there was men living in
Mhm. Mhm.
squalor, and you have that represented, and then it cuts to a scene of the Dave, which is the main character of the story, waking up in bed to an earthquake happening in California. So this will become important later on in our discussion, but this leads to us finding out about Dave a little bit. We get into this background of this. I guess we at the time would have been a modern age boy, uh, teenage boy growing up in high school in California, and he has a friend who he's close with, who his name is Stoney, and both of them are kind of like, I guess you would say they were kind of geeks in school. Um, Whereas they definitely weren't a part of like the cooler crowd necessarily. It's actually
Right.
difficult to describe Stoney's character, but we'll get into that as well. But as you go on through the story, both these characters stumble across a an iced up man buried in the ground, who we later find out is a caveman, and he the reason why they find him is because they were digging up in the backyard for to build a pool. He's helping digging a hole so that eventually they could build a pool in the backyard.
Yeah, he's taking the
And
pool out.
yeah, and as they do that, they find Cro-Magnon Man, and this person that they end up naming, and then hilarity ensues because you have this evolving, I guess, ancient man evolving very rapidly in our society, almost kind of a reflection of how our society also started evolving very rapidly. All of a sudden, there's a lot of things to just have to know on a day to day to survive, and
Mhm.
not quite the survival instincts that the caveman needed. But those do come in handy as well. And then eventually they become good friends with him. And of course, his name is Link. And them and Link have a few montages of him developing his character, becoming more like a modern teenage boy instead of, the frozen in time teenage caveman, and giving an opportunity for this caveman to grow as they did. And there's a lot of talk about friendship and a lot of conversation about relationships during teenage years. And yeah, and then it ends with everybody having a happy ending and getting the girl they want. And yeah, that's pretty much the story. Did you have anything to add, Eric?
Yeah. No, not really. I would. That's pretty. That's pretty well summarized. I mean, it's a pretty straightforward movie. There's not much more to it. It's what you'd expect out of out of this type of film. Yeah.
Mhm. Now it is a little bit strange. I mean, it is an odd film, in the sense that like somebody came up with this kind of odd idea of having a caveman found in their backyard and then digging it up and then it being like frozen in time, sort of like still alive. Um, Obviously, you have to have a suspension of disbelief. The science isn't fact or anything in this movie. I mean,
Definitely
it
not.
it is a comedy, and I think the real fun, the idea, the fun games they play with it, um, has it has to do a lot with just this idea of like what it's like to grow up now as a, well, I should say in the 90s as a teenager in high school, and the pressures and the sort of, you know, the reason why a lot of teenagers feel, I guess, misplaced or displaced or uh, you know, um, what do you say? Like, trying to think of the word right now, but I can't. But that's okay. So yeah, you have this journey with this caveman, and but the journey really here is about these boys, and yeah. So let's get into the upon further reflection. So what are we really seeing in this story? Well, I think the first thing you're really going to notice is the main character Dave is not necessarily a likable hero. He's kind of annoying, in fact, because he's this friend who's really involved with. Well, he's definitely insecure. He's got a lot of insecurities, and he's really invested in becoming popular in high school. And I think a big part of him, they kind of tie it in there where it's like the reason why he wants to be popular is because he really wants to get involved with this girl Rachel that he liked since, I don't know, the younger years, and never thought to ask her. And
Well, they knew each
um
other, right? Growing up.
yeah, so they knew each other growing up. There's a picture at one point he shows her of them bathing together as children, which that was kind of weird. But again, he's a teenage boy. We have to remember that while you're watching the film. So teenage boys do have characteristics of doing odd things because of their insecurities. And the one thing is bizarre with him is that he's so sure, confident that he's supposed to be with this girl. And it's funny because like his friend Stoney will come up to him and say like, there's not a chance in hell because you're not from the same, like she's not interested, she's clearly interested in a certain type of guy,
Right.
and they have to be strong and well developed, I guess. And so yeah, I mean there's this kind of this storyline where it's like, you have this guy who's insecure, who's trying to find a way in to make this girl like him, and it's really why he's trying to do all these things like become popular or become important, because just so he can get
Yeah.
the attention of this girl. But it's kind of interesting because even though you would think, okay, well, that's such an annoying character, why is he like that? I mean, I think that it's important to remember again that they're supposed to be teenagers in high school, and as long as you focus on that, you'd be like,
Well, they're
okay,
seniors, right? Their graduation is coming up. They're about to,
yeah,
go on with their, college
yeah, they're
years.
yeah,
So
exactly.
it's their last hurrah, basically.
Yeah, and if you think of like the hormones and stuff going on at that time in that stage of your life, you know, you're more willing to do crazy things and behave oddly or change your relationships with your friend, or and then you know there's a lot of discovery during that high school years. So I think you kind of get that from this journey, but obviously it gets taken away from some of the story. So it's like, you know, the odd thing here and there is like, okay, so you have this caveman, and then you have to remember, okay, the caveman came out of ice, out of the ground. And I mean, how realistic is that to begin with?
Well, yeah, like you said earlier, you have to kind of suspend uh
Yeah,
uh your belief a little bit of some of these concepts, right? Like, first of all, you're not gonna have um just a block of ice just a few meters down underground in Encino, California, right?
yeah,
So, I mean, if you let that go, if you let go of the idea that a single kid is digging out a huge pool as well, um, just with a single shovel, I think, yeah, exactly. And I think part of it is that one of the things that I noticed, and because it's a 90s movie, it's one of the themes here is just embracing the absurd. And that's very much a product of the 90s, having just like this carefree, nonsensical spirit. Um, and the movie really just kind of encourages you to let go and find humor in unexpected things. And that very much comes into play with Link and discovering the modern world, right?
mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's kind of like an old thing that's been done in literature before, where it's like you mock your society by using like an older or another society. You know what I mean? Like in a story. So it's
Yeah,
like,
it's your classic
although
fish out of water type story,
yeah,
right?
yeah, exactly. So you have this person who doesn't really necessarily fit into the 90s lifestyle, but I mean that's more a reflection on like if you took somebody from out of country, like they you know they point that out that
Yeah,
he's from
whether it's
Estonia
cultural.
or whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So he's going to have a lot of things that he's going to have to pick up and learn that are culturally acceptable. I mean, it is odd that the parents just assume that he's from Estonia after watching him eat dog food, or you know, yeah, there's a couple of weird things that he does right in
Well,
front of him, and
and that's another thing that I think wouldn't really stand the test of time is, the fact that, you're talking about a country that you may not have heard of before, and then you're making certain generalizations about said country that you've maybe never have heard about before. And that's why you're willing to believe these generalizations because, hey,
yeah,
I've never heard of that country before. They must do it like that, right?
yep,
Which I mean, again, product of the 90s, and it seems to be a pretty common theme where things were just said more off the cuff without, putting a little bit more thought. Again, these are movies for Western audiences, um, and didn't have uh as much as the global reach that movies have now, right?
mm-hmm. And I mean, this movie has all the really like the common themes of like a 90s film, where it's like you know the movie basically tells you what to expect, because you know it just happens that in their history class they're learning about cavemen, and you know what I mean.
About
Like,
Cro-Magnon, yeah,
yeah, so they
exactly.
just happen to be learning about the same around the same time that he comes across this like bowl and this buried ice man. And just the funny, like, I mean, I do think that the way the teenagers react in this story are pretty realistic. That's the one thing I would say is real. And in the sense that, like, yeah, if two teenage boys found, you know, a caveman in their backyard, yes, they would definitely want to keep that to themselves. And I don't think it would be like he makes it out to be like some sort of way of getting into being popular, but
You're right
Um,
because they try to exactly. He tries to leverage the idea that getting a caveman or having a caveman and not revealing him to the world is going to somehow make him famous, get him popular, when all of that stuff is kind of dependent on him telling people that he's got a caveman. So it's kind of it kind of conflicts with itself, right?
yeah,
But again, that's the short-sightedness of these teenage guys, right? Like they can't see more than a foot ahead of them, um, which is kind of what leads to all of this string of bad decision making.
yeah, exactly. I mean, he does kind of
And I
like
mean, not just no, I was going to say
convince.
not just that. I mean, part of it is the and you mentioned it earlier about his fixation on popularity. And one of the things about this movie that I think it did really well is that it kind of it kind of showed you how shallow chasing popularity is, and how it gets you absolutely nowhere.
Right.
Because like you said, Dave, he kind of uses Link to gain status, but through all of the experiences that he has with Link, with showing Link how to live in the modern world, he actually learns to just be himself, which is what the girl at the end actually wanted him to do, right? So, I mean, it kind of ended up, I mean, Link ended up teaching these guys just as much as, well, maybe not just as much, but I think they taught the two guys a little bit about how to live uh, like an actual person and not chase you know, things that don't matter.
Yes, exactly. So through the experience of this caveman, they learn to be more, well, we should say the main character Dave learns to be more confident in himself because
Dave, yeah, Stoney, I think
Stoney's a
because
different
he's such
character
a
altogether. Yeah, it's
he
a
has such a hippie vibe to him that I mean he even wears like the bell bottoms and the vests and like the open shirts that you kind of think he's a fish out of water too, where this guy's a hippie living in the early 90s, right? He also doesn't fit in.
no. He Pauly Shore's character, and it was interesting about it is kind of its own thing in the 90s. It's almost like a hipster, um in the sense that like he's in the know, he's aware of what's cool, what's not, but he's completely confident in himself and how he dresses and what how he talks,
Hmm.
and he to the point where he's made his own journey, he's made his own, like, people want to
Carved
be
his own
like,
path.
yeah, people like in the story even, you'll notice that he's influential, like other people start talking like him, other people want to start, getting to know him just because of his behavior, because but it's also a big part of it is having that confidence, and that's what he learns. And I think Dave doesn't see that at first, but he has to learn through Cro-Magnon Man. But the idea is through Link. But the idea is that, like, yeah, like you have these two different juxtapositions of the same teenage boy. So you have a teenage boy who's, very uh you know insecure, not unsure of himself, and showing you what that's like to, and how annoying that is for people to have to talk to someone like that on a day to day, because, like, why can't you just be confident in yourself and who you are? And on the other side, you have this very confident, friend who's is to actually is supposed to, I think, represent, like, the best kind of friend, because this is the kind of friend who sticks with him even though he's an ass to him, even though he constantly shows that he's more interested in his own gains over what his friends are doing or getting. And so Pauly Shore is kind of like there to show you that there's another way of being. And I think it's kind of cool where, he does these things where he's like, he's just very honest, right? He's very earnest and
Mhm.
with his friend, and I think that's very important with friendship. And I think that you shouldn't expect that from anybody else but your friend. And it's like he doesn't see how important or how value that at first until the end. And even in the end, I
Exactly.
don't know. I don't know if Dave really gets it because the ending is just like him getting the girl, which I was
It's
like,
yeah. It kind of ends abruptly when he gets the girl. It's like, hey, okay, that's the end of the story. We're gonna cut it short here because
so
I
it kind
guess
of takes
as
away from the
Suna,
story that I was getting into, and
it,
I think
it
I
it's
think
it
yeah,
takes away from the reality of the situation, right? It just kind of
yeah,
leaves it on a yeah, our hero got the girl. That's it, and
yeah,
that's where things end, right?
and then
Without
and
giving
then
us a little bit.
and then they give the caveman also a girlfriend. Like they're like, oh, by the way, he had a frozen
Yeah,
girlfriend,
they
and
had the
then
frozen. Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
and she unthawed, and so now there's two cave people living in modern age. I don't know how they're gonna get by, but they'll figure it out, I'm sure. And and yeah, and they just had to give you that kind of happy ending, I guess. And then for whatever reason, Stoney is just Stoney, and I think they kind of. I think that's kind of a part of Pauly Shore's character, and maybe that's just only in this movie because I can't remember the other movies he's done. Um, but like in this movie, I feel like the character is very asexual. Like he's not interested in girls, not interested in guys. He's just very like,
He's just
uh,
interested in vibing.
yeah,
He's just
vibing,
like
just hanging out, just
he's all about the chill,
the
right? Which is
chill.
like
Yeah,
he's totally got this like hippie vibe to him, right? Where if it wasn't a Disney movie, they would probably have him smoking a joint, probably one at some point in this movie or another. Seriously, I think if it wasn't for the fact that it's a Disney movie, they probably would have
I mean
played
they
up
did
that
name him
fact because
Stony,
he's a
so
he's a
yeah,
stoner without the actual smoking, without the
yeah,
paraphernalia or anything like that. But I mean, the way he talks, the way he moves, the way he's always looking for food to eat. I mean, this guy's Shaggy to a T, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah. It definitely plays that character. And there's a lot of characteristics of hippiedom in him, of course. Um, there's also like the character for Stoney is also interesting in other ways, where he also is very into Jeopardy, and that's I like that kind of funny
I, I, yeah, that was a really
scene.
interesting character
Yeah,
part about
yeah,
him.
where
No, go
it's
ahead.
like yeah, so it's just where Dave is just like he doesn't know a lot of it. He's like, man, don't you watch Jeopardy? Like it's like you should read something, or at least watch some like quality TV.
Something good, right? Exactly.
So I think
Yeah,
there's
that's his
some,
gauge.
again, it's like this honesty, this kind of like sincerity, and it's just like just he's like the good angel on the shoulder, kind of reminding him like, hey, I get that you're angry about like not getting what you want, but remember
Yeah,
this guy over here is living in a completely different environment, and he can never go back to where he's from. And so,
no, exactly.
and there's like these little reminders throughout the film, and you can tell that Dave's character, and again, as a teenage boy, I could see that happening. A teenage boy not understanding fully, not, or maybe understanding but not taking the time to focus on anybody else's feelings because you're too busy concerned about your own. And so,
Hmm.
you know when Link hits on his girlfriend, or Rachel's into him, or whatever it is, all of a sudden he's just very distraught about it, doesn't like that Link is getting attention, so he tries to like get rid of him by driving him off in the sunset, like getting rid of him like he's a pet dog or something. Like, yeah, go on, boy, like, no, you need to is a human being with feelings. And so his other friend follows him and reminds him of that, of course. And he's like, you can't just throw him away just because all of a sudden you're not getting what you want, or because he's getting in your
Exactly.
way. And of course, he reminds them too that you've developed a friendship with this person now. You've developed, even though he wasn't anything to you before, he's family now, right? And so there's
Yep.
like a little bit of that,
Exactly.
yeah, journey that you get from the story as well. And I really like that focus. And again, I wish more of the film was focused on that story and less on the love interests. I don't see the purpose in having like the love interest. And did you notice also the girl that's friends with Rachel? She's I think I've seen her. What was she? She was in like Prison Break or something
Yeah.
like that.
I think,
Yeah.
yeah, something like that.
Yeah, I've seen her definitely in other stuff before, but yeah, she like, is just like this kind of like teenage girl who's just looking for like a handsome guy that she wants to, make out with or whatever. And like there's a lot of this like extra, I guess it's teenagey. It's got some, I don't, but I find like maybe it's not romance, but it's like it's unnecessary relationships conversations. But then again, that was Dave's drive, right? Dave's supposed drive was that he needed to get with Rachel, and in the end, he
Exactly.
he realized it wasn't about being popular; it was just about being himself and being happy with who he was. But I think it would have been even better ending too if he got no girl in the end. Rachel still wasn't interested in him because let's be realistic. I mean, if you're a geek in high school and you're a teenager, you're probably gonna have to wait till your
You're not
20s.
getting you're not getting the popular girl. Like you're
Yeah,
kidding yourself, right?
exactly. Like, and I mean, with all fairness, like if you're looking at the perspective, like if this movie was turned around and it was about Rachel, I mean, what what is he offering that she would like to get from, especially as a teenage girl? Like what is what is she gonna get out of that relationship with this like
What's
kind
he
of,
bringing to the table?
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. So for him to have these high expectations that Rachel's just gonna fall in love with me, and in the end she kind of does for no reason. It doesn't really make sense the way they wrap it up. Like, oh, by the way, it was really cool how you're nice to Link now, so I like you. Like what? I didn't really get where they
yeah.
connected.
They kind of the way they tied it off was kind of haphazard.
Hmm.
One of the best parts of the movie though was the end when the I guess the villain of the movie, the jock, um reveals to everybody at the prom that Link is in fact a caveman with photographic evidence, and everybody just cheers as if like they don't give a shit. Like fuck it, like fuck that. We're
That
gonna fucking cheer. That was
yeah,
amazing. I mean, I remember that scene from when I was a kid, and I look forward to that scene because even to this day, I think it's absolutely hilarious.
yeah, because exactly, like what do you mean you have evidence he's a caveman? Like even if you showed pictures, it doesn't matter if it
But
was,
he's not a caveman. Nobody's gonna believe that,
no one's
right?
gonna believe that. There's no way. It's like you did something, you did a trick with your camera, whatever it is, even if it's Polaroid pictures, right? There's so many things you could do to make things look real.
Exactly.
So at the end of the day, yeah, it was never gonna work. But I like that again. It was very teenage boy of the bully. I forget his name now. What was his name? It's like Mike or something like that. I don't know, but
I don't remember.
yeah, but either way, that bully character was hilarious because he is very typical with the frosted tips of the 90s. And like, he's a sports player. He plays hockey, which is, for Canadians is, right there, but like I don't know. It was kind of bizarre being in California playing hockey, but sure, whatever.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, yeah, that was interesting. And then you have this whole thing where he just keeps like picking on Dave because he knows that Dave is into Rachel. And it's almost like a weird obsession because I don't like if you recreated that storyline now, it would be almost like that guy was actually into Dave. Because like, why would it matter to him so much that this guy liked his girlfriend? You know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
it didn't really matter because he knew who and so again you have this other person who's the other version of insecurity, where it's like he's so insecure that he lifts weights and needs to do all these things and to be popular. And as soon as he starts losing that sort of attention he was getting, it's like he loses his mind, right? And then it's like, oh, I have to find the evidence.
exactly.
He starts doing things that like illegal things to sneak and find records and whatever. So it's just like, yeah, it's very bizarre, but at the same time, it's what that character is really. I mean, I do like that he still is very much like a teenage boy. So yeah, I think the issue is like the boys are well done in this film, but the girls aren't fully developed characters. You know.
No, they're very much one-dimensional, very uh,
So yeah, I don't think the female characters were really developed. But especially Rachel, like unfortunately, you have all these like things that he's supposed to be interested about her, but like they didn't even give us enough um like enough of any kind of relationship between them. Like you don't actually get to see the
no.
friendship at all. Like
They treat
how
the girls more like props in the movie than they do characters, I would say.
yeah. Yeah.
It's kind of disappointing because I think they could offer something. But I think that's what happens when the story is mostly focused on just the three main characters.
Yeah, three
Link,
main
uh,
male
Dave,
characters. Yeah. So it's very much
and
for yeah.
Stoney. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, that's fine. I mean, it's not the worst thing. It's just that it just happens to be a very common thing to see in those like sort of 90s teenage drama movies, right?
Right.
And like the focus on the boys, boys will be boys, boys growing up, and it's like no storyline for girls developing or anything like that. But then again, there's certain directors that change that in the 90s, and we'll probably, just to name drop Kevin Smith, we'll probably end up talking about. I might be giving you guys a hint. Those are who are listening, that we might be talking about a Kevin Smith movie very soon. But yes, just to give you an idea of like the difference where, again, you have young adults being portrayed, male characters being important, but also having a development of female characters as well.
Hmm.
Um,
Absolutely.
Now, more on the like the relationships. There's the big theme here is again is friendship. Um, and that's what I felt is like there's what's more important to me was the relationship between Dave, Stoney, and Link. Um, Link is the new kid in school. Link is, you know, even though he could have made friends with the bully, he could have made friends with other people.
Hmm.
He found that the people that found him that helped him out originally, he trusts more, and he values their time. And so there is like this connection, this like bond that happens, and it's funny because like Dave is again looking at it like, oh, this guy is gonna make us popular. Instead of like again, it's such a
That's yeah.
bizarre thing to think. It's like, well,
It's his first thought. It's not like, oh my God, this is the person. It's like, no,
yeah,
this guy's gonna make us popular.
this guy's gonna make us
Exactly.
popular. Yeah. Um like he's gonna get us into the school, like we're gonna make him like the cool friend. All the girls are gonna like him. It's just like such a bizarre, like again, such a weird interpretation of Link's character. Because I would have thought like, oh my gosh, we have a disaster here. We have like an animal. Like we can't bring this thing to school. like,
Well, exactly.
like a more realistic version of a caveman. Actually, I feel like a caveman being brought to this reality now would probably just drop dead of anxiety. Would just like,
Or just like all the diseases and shit like that, probably from
oh
the
yeah,
fucking pollution we have in the air, right? Like
yeah,
there's
that's
all
true too.
kinds of stuff that their bodies aren't used to that we've got floating around,
Yeah, that's true. I didn't even think of that. Like, if you go even more scientific, like,
right?
yeah,
There's all
this,
kinds of nonsense that'll kill it now.
yeah, the poor
And,
caveman would
vice
not
versa too,
survive.
like if one of
Yeah,
us got sent back to his time period, we'd probably be equally as screwed.
yes, but in a different way. Um,
Exactly.
yeah, like our defenses are very strong, immunity wise, but then when it comes to like fighting a bear with our bare hands, I mean, there are some people
Not
out
so
there.
much.
Yeah, I mean, there's some people out there that have some pretty good training. I don't know. They could probably take a bear. I don't know. I don't. But yeah, I'm sure there's some guy out there that trains really hard. And I mean, if you've watched any of these shows, like there's so many people out there who train really hard to be big and strong, and for different types of jobs, rock climbing jobs, rescue jobs, firemen, I don't know if police have
Hmm.
to necessarily be fit, but they can be. And um, yeah, I mean, these people are going to be picking up other people. They're going to be so they might have the strength to withstand. I think the thing is that humans are resilient. So I think the important thing is that yeah, if you took the caveman out of the caveman era and you put them into this era, they should be able to learn how to socialize pretty quickly because their brain would absorb new information. But again, that's
Mm.
just like very hypothetical, right? Like he's learning like a child and that his brain is like a sponge. Because you got to think like if this is supposed to be a teenage version of a human, a caveman, which again wouldn't have existed. There's no such thing as teenage. It would have just been an adult caveman, like, right?
Exactly.
Um, like, would it have the adaptive abilities? Would it be able to learn as quickly? Um, it's funny where the first thing he does is like they to make it really funny is like he steps on a rake, like it's like the oldest slapstick thing in the book.
Yeah.
Have you ever stepped on a rake before and then it just like hits you in the
Yeah.
face?
It
I,
just
I've
hits you in the face, just goes
yeah,
straight up.
it's happened to me before actually, where I stepped on a rake and the pole hit me. Um, but maybe not like quite like the way it does in the movie. Like it's not as hilarious, where he gets hit in the face and he falls over and then he gets back up. Um,
Hmm.
but definitely have seen it happen. Yeah. Um, and from there, he has other interactions, like he's interacts with the dog, but like interacts with the dog as if it's like, you know, a person. I thought that was bizarre. I think him
That
not
was
being
weird. Yeah.
afraid of the dog to begin with because it's an animal that he's not familiar with. Um, yeah, that was just out of ordinary. Um, there was, and then the things that he would be scared of were also out of ordinary too. but he does get excited about fire, which is kind of funny as well.
The distraction with the lighter was a
Yeah,
classic moment in that movie, right?
yeah, and to be honest, Brendan Fraser acted his butt off in this movie. I think he did a really good job. I think he like although he didn't have a lot of lines, he did a pretty good job of being
Exactly.
the sort of silly character.
My understanding is that was his primary hesitation in wanting to do this movie. Apparently, he turned it down about 8 times before agreeing to actually do it.
Wow. Okay. Interesting.
So
So what
yeah, it
made him
must have
finally
taken a
just
lot of that. I don't know. I
yeah.
wasn't able to find that out, but yeah, it must have taken a lot of convincing to be able to change his mind like that.
Yeah, and I think it's cool that again you had to have that Stony friend with you couldn't just have Dave find him on his own and then watch that girl. You had to
Yeah.
have this friend who was already confident in themselves and who also represented themselves differently than other people because humans kind of
Hmm.
suck in general. So what Stoney calls himself a lot is he mentions this a few times in the film where he's not, or I think the first time was when they were talking about like he's like we're just geeks or whatever, and he's like I'm not a geek. He's like I'm a unique weasel. So, and I think that's really interesting that he identifies himself as a weasel, and not a this or not a that. He's just like I'm a
It's
weasel. I
not.
go,
It's yeah. It's
but
it's
it's
interesting that he would just kind of like label himself something like that. But I mean, it also it speaks to the confidence that he has,
exactly,
like
exactly,
like you said earlier, in himself, right? Like it's
yeah,
not. He's he knows who he is. He doesn't need the validation of anybody else. He's figured out who he is pretty early on, it seems like, and that's not something that your typical high school student has. Like you still have people finding themselves in their late 20s, 30s, or hell, they spend their entire life finding who they really are. And this guy seems to have really figured it out.
exactly. He's figured it out at a very young age, and I would have wished to have had that sort of confidence when I was in high school. That's all I can say. I mean, who knows where you could have gotten from there? Because that's the kind of personality you need in most of life. I think is just to be a little more relaxed, a little more confident, a little less
Little bit
anxious.
less inhibited for sure. But I mean, I feel like that character took it to an extreme. Like you don't want to seem too relaxed, too uh too easy with everything, like you want people to think that you can take certain situations seriously when it calls for it. And I feel like Stoney didn't really reflect. I mean, sure, when things got serious between him and Dave because of Link, definitely. Um, but
Yeah, I
for the
think he was
most
still
part,
more
most
responsive.
most of the
Well, I think he
interactions,
had he had the better ethics, but I don't know if they both needed
absolutely,
less
he did.
lesson and responsibility. Yeah, for sure. Because they almost like raised this person like a child. So like, and there is part of the story where Dave becomes almost like he starts talking like he's like, "What are you, my mom? What is mom or something like that?" And I
Yep.
think Dave becomes like very much like the parent in the scenario. And it's funny that he refers to him as mom and not dad because mom is always the one that puts down the law. you know?
Yeah, she seems to be the disciplinarian, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, in the case of
Again,
Stoney,
reflecting on the
he very
'90s. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. For Stoney, it very much seemed like he pulled Dave back because, I mean, from the outset, he knew that Dave's idea of getting popular from this was was not going to work, right? And like throughout the movie, he was just happy that they were able to make a new friend, right? He didn't care about anything else. He didn't care about the
Mhm.
popularity. He didn't care about the attention that Link was getting. All he cared about was that they made a new friend, right?
Well, it's something that I've heard RuPaul say once, and well, once he's said it so many times. But if you can't love yourself, how are you going to love somebody else, right? And I think that's a big
Mm,
thing in the story. It's like this guy Dave had to learn to love himself the way that Pauly Shore, and it's not loving yourself as in like idolizing yourself. It's as in like just being happy with who you are, accepting who you
with who
are,
you are, exactly,
yeah,
exactly,
and being happy with what you have, right? Being humble, right? Yeah,
exactly. And yeah, that's a hard thing to do at
at a
age.
teenage, yeah,
But again, Sony seemed to have really figured that out. But with Dave, yeah, it took him a little bit to realize what was really important in the end.
yeah. There was also like there was a relationship part where they talked about, well, they showed the bully punches him in the face, and um Link being, a caveman, not understanding why this person just hit him in the face, didn't really react the way that anybody expected and just walked away. Um,
Exactly,
and everybody kind of thought more or less that he was the bigger person, but not really, because teenagers, again, they would see it as like, oh, the other guy won the fight. But in reality, and like this Link person is the bigger person because it's like what was the value of fighting there, and what were they really
exactly. Nothing,
fighting about?
nothing was gained, right?
Yeah, exactly. If it was if you only had to ever fight for survival, and I think Stoney brings this up at one point, then why would you think like fighting another person is valuable or worth your time?
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
then they go through a whole fighting montage and then show him a bunch of videos to learn how to fight, defend himself. Which he uses some wrestling moves later on to throw the bully away. Um, but it's more of a, again, yeah, there's a little bit of like, oh, look how cool he is. He beat up the bully. Everybody's like happy about it. But I think in the end, it's like it's nice to see that they're showing that there are good reasons for fighting, and it's to defend yourself, and that's probably the only reason. So yeah.
Well, it's that
um
whole paradox of tolerance, right? Where like you don't have to tolerate people that are so intolerant that it becomes a problem. Some people have to be dealt with, and in this case, it was that boy. But again, I think he kind of took care of himself with trying to outlink by revealing he was a caveman when that really doesn't matter to anybody. Like everybody had bonded with him in one way or another that it didn't matter, right? Like
yeah,
he was just as much a student of that high school that as everyone else was. So what did it
and
matter? He
keeping in
was a
the like,
caveman.
yeah, and then in keeping in the 90s vibe, like what made him more popular was that he liked dancing and that he liked to party,
Oh, for
and
sure.
that was like the big thing. And like even like those cool dudes that were younger that were like dancing in front of their locker, like, and he gets into it with them, like those guys
Uh-huh.
were, it's all about like this early age, again, early 90s hip hop scene where it was all about like the quick and dance and love and yeah,
Exactly.
and be happy. Yeah. So that's really where he's shown. And I think it kind of gives you that idea of like, the early caveman maybe wouldn't necessarily jump to fighting, but that's not necessarily true. I don't know. I feel like a caveman probably would have ripped that guy to shreds, like, like an animal.
Yeah, if he had actually really tried to and not
Yeah.
just mimicked like the wrestling moves that he saw, then I think, yeah, he probably would have. If he actually went caveman on him, he probably would have killed him.
Yeah. And I mean, assuming that, again, this was based on real science and you could somehow go back in time and bring a caveman uh, back to this reality. Um, Now, let's talk a little bit about um, let's put some time on talking about how if this movie how it talks to us and if it's relevant to our time. And I think this movie doesn't has a lot of things that makes it old and dated.
Mhm.
And uh, teenagers now would watch this and probably convulse and then like throw up or
Right.
something. I have no idea. They just there's just a lot of weird like cringe moments. Like now
As oh,
teenagers will
what's the new word for cringe? Chuggy. That's what they'd call this movie,
right,
right?
sorry, cringe or chuggy or whatever it is. But even
That
then,
yeah.
like
So
we're talking about that now, but like think about all the words that were used in this film, like when they talked about girls' boobs, calling
for
them
sure,
bazungas. When they're talking
all of the early '90s slang definitely
calling a
it
girl
was
a
it was a
Betty.
throwback.
Yeah, like
Oh,
that
yeah.
was like, oh my gosh, that's what is this, the 1950s?
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
and then for something to be cool, they would say greasy. You know, that's very greasy. Oh, greasy. Um, and then like things that are normal are often considered boring. And I mean that's normal in the 90s too.
Right.
Um, yeah, what else? What other like things I can't even think of. There's so many like little things. I mean, obviously, there's also the waiting by the phone for somebody to call, calling the home phone. Those things again are a little bit
Yep.
dated. The types of vehicles being used. Um,
I think if you were to look at the themes in this movie, the whole friendship part, fish out of water,
yeah,
being chasing popularity versus being your authentic self. I think you can find all of those themes in probably a newer movie, something that's probably even a little bit better too.
yeah,
Um,
definitely.
I mean, if you're looking for something for nostalgia about the early '90s, you could probably watch something else that you'll enjoy a little bit more and might even have a lot of the same elements. Now, if you're just looking for a goofy Brendan Fraser movie, um, then I mean, this is it, right? Like this
Yeah,
is
yeah.
your
If you just want to
classic
watch, if you want to watch an old movie with
1990s
Brendan Fraser having fun, and just like just dancing and doing a lot of like crazy
being goofy.
moves, yeah, being goofy, then this is a good movie for that. But otherwise, you're right, there's a lot of movies out there now about friendship and male friendships, that are way more valuable, and um, you don't necessarily need to watch this for that. But there is, like, again, there's probably some nostalgia for like a certain age group, for people who did grow up on these movies in the 90s. And if you're thinking about going back to watch this movie, just be prepared to not be as committed as you were back in the day. Let's
Yeah,
just say that.
definitely.
Yeah,
Definitely. I mean,
yeah,
you really have to temper your expectation. I mean, if, because I didn't watch this movie too many times growing up, probably like a handful of times, when I was a kid. But since then, I'd never watched it. And I really tempered my expectations, after like the first 15 minutes, because I mean, you kind of have to, or you probably won't be able to sit through the whole thing.
yeah. Like maybe it's just me because I'm getting closer to being 40, but um again, dating myself here. But um there were some parts of the film. I mean, every film I'm going to watch, I read a little bit into it a little bit differently now as an adult. And I think what I really connected with this time around watching this film was just that scene where the caveman is in the museum and realizes that
Hmm.
everything that and it's really odd because I mean you're giving this kind of existential thought process to a caveman, right, who should be just in shock all the time. But
Yep.
like in this scenario, they're just giving you kind of this idea, like let's say you did take a simple-minded person and you put them into a scenario where they realize that everything they knew growing up is gone and now they're in a different reality. It just kind of, again, you go through, he goes through this existential crisis there, and
Hmm.
is in tears. And I really, really like that scene. I thought that that scene is still very valuable.
It's like
Um,
the reality of the situation finally hits him, right?
yeah, and I thought that was very important. But it is just like almost like too much for this type of movie. You know what I mean? Like it was just like out of place because it's like, isn't this supposed to be a funny movie? And then all
Yeah,
of a sudden it
exactly.
just gets really real, you know, for a few minutes. I mean, even up to the point where when they were at the bar and they meet up with those Latino men, and they're getting Smokey to drink, and which is hilarious. Like he doesn't smoke any weed in the movie, but he drinks shots as a teenage boy. But um and then there's this like, it's still funny even when that scene is supposed to be like, oh my god, these guys are gangsters, they might kill them or whatever. It's still made into being a funny scene because it's like, instead of him being upset with the caveman, you know, hanging out like dancing with his girlfriend or whatever, when he says that thing in Latin American, I think he says something about like the cheese is stinky, I need to go to the bathroom, in Spanish. and then the guy interprets it as like he's making fun of the girl, like her cheese is stinky or whatever. So so he like kind of laughs it off and he's like, you're right, man, she's not worth it. And then, you know, and it just kind of makes it into this funny scene instead of like, you know, it could have gone completely different direction if they really wanted to. But
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
everything is just very, very much in a humorous kind of perspective, except for that existential dread scene, which I think is kind of funny that they put that in there. Um, like why, you know, I mean, I like the development, I like of the character, but I just don't know why they decided to put that in there. And it's especially because they were tying it in again back to the fact that this teacher just happens to be teaching history lesson about the ice age when they have an actual caveman living with them. So
Hmm.
what a coincidence, you know. So ironic. um and yeah, I like that. I like also the friendship stuff makes me touched me this time around. Like I really, you know, the idea of having a friend that sticks around with you, helps you out, has all that confidence to help you through your times when you're feeling low, when you're not at your best as a human being.
Hmm.
I think Pauly Shore's character really spoke a lot to me this time around, even though, again, I don't particularly, I find Pauly Shore, you know, kind of annoying, kind of, you know, a lot of people would say that, but there's something about endearing about the character in this movie where he's just like this like really good friend, you know. And then also you kind of see like this sort of friendship between three of them as actors, you know, when they're like kind of being goofy together, you know, all three of them, and Brendan Fraser's kind of holding both of them under his arm, and you can tell they probably had fun, right, making this film. So
Absolutely,
there's,
they would. Yeah,
yeah, so there's those things that I focused on for sure this time around, even though I would say again, I might not ever watch this movie again, but I definitely got some good positive vibes from it.
something
And
from it. Yeah,
yeah, and it's not to say that it's not worth watching. It's just that yeah, like we were saying before, it's just like, you know, don't raise your expectations watching this film. Have a suspension of disbelief, expect it to be a little bit dated, a little bit cheesy. Yeah, and yeah, and then it'll be fine. Um, yeah, I mean, we kind of touched on everything else. I mean, I thought about, like, again, the unreason, we talked about the weird ending for no reason. They just had to have like the Dave
the
character
the, the
gets
abrupt
Rachel.
ending.
which I would like to say that the real ending should have been that Dave doesn't get with Rachel. Rachel still, um, isn't interested in him that way. Would rather just stay friends. And Dave goes to college and figures stuff out from there.
Figures out
Um,
his life from there. Yeah.
you know what I mean? And I think it would have been, and then like the whole thing where Link finds a cave girl. I think that was probably more of a happy ending for me than Dave getting with Rachel. Because if you think about the plight of a caveman who is never going to be able to go back in time and save the people that he finally he confronts somebody else that's also from his time, that would be huge, right? So I think that to me is more of a happy ending than Dave figuring out his girlfriend relationship situation.
Mhm.
So yeah, but I mean, was it necessary? No. I think it could have just ended like an indie movie, just like cut off with like they're all good friends now, and it ends at the
And
prom,
then just kind of like, yeah,
you know,
just fade to
and
black and get there.
yeah, and then you can kind of imagine whatever you want, um, and then it could be even funnier that like funnier ending than just like a melted cave girl. It could have been like a whole cave family, like just it just happens to have like all his like relatives and stuff just like all
A frozen cave
frozen
family.
cave family digs them up. Then they have to get social workers, and then it'd be like Encino Men is the name
Oh
of their
my
next
god.
movie.
Encino
There,
family.
Encino Family, Encino Family.
Interestingly enough, this movie, since nobody outside of North America or probably even the US knew where Encino was, they actually call this movie California Man in Europe.
Oh, okay, that's interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
California Man. I mean, that's the one thing we didn't touch on is the major thing that kept coming up too is like the earthquakes. I think
The earthquakes, yeah.
the earthquakes was to tie into the fact that to make it more realistic with the fact that yeah, you could actually technically find remains of diamonds. Actually, this happens to be a true fact that I learned recently from watching Netflix. But like apparently like yeah, there in California like there's tons of earthquakes that happen, or possibility of earthquakes that happen
Mm,
all the time because they're on like a whole bunch of like I forget what they're called, but on the like the break lines of like the fault lines. Sorry, fault lines. So there's a bunch of fault lines all through Los Angeles, San
all
Francisco,
through California, yeah.
California. Yeah. So because of that, they do actually get quite a bit of earthquakes, and it's like a common thing you have to be aware of, like that it could happen that you could get an earthquake. So and also apparently because of that, there's a lot of possibility that there's a lot of shifting of land and sand and whatever, and then they
Hmm.
uncover like ancient dinosaur bones and stuff like that all the time
Yep.
over there because of it. So yeah, so just a little bit of a history lesson there, which is kind of cool that they tied that into the film as well. Um, but also just to give you an idea of the background of where they're living, and
Hmm.
yeah, yeah, it was pretty good. But anyway, I digress. That's it for us today, and I don't know, did you have anything else you wanted to add?
No, I think we covered it pretty well today.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, Encino Man had some things to be said, but as the movie goes, it we've delved into as much as we could, and yeah, appreciate you guys listening. And if you follow up with us next time, we'll be doing the movie Mallrats, and then we'll get some more conversation about relationships between girls and boys and that sort of thing. So yeah.
All right.
Uh, okay. And yeah, well, enjoy the rest of the song. Have a great Art. Thanks for listening.
Enjoy.
Gimme that in the city chair. Double round in my whip, itty bitty, looking pretty chill. Put my shades on, you ain't even seen it yet. Man, I'm so fresh, and you know I'm always spelling chill. Give me what you want, what you got, cause I never get enough. You ask me how I want it, and you say you want a chance on me. Chances are you don't know how to do this shit respectfully. I say it like it rough, cause I need a man protecting me. I ain't say this shit for later. I said, baby, come and get it. Feels taking over if you let him. I'ma take the paper, I'ma roll it up for later. He might do what he wanted, cause I let him. Give me something that I'm never gonna forget. Because baby, I'm the only one you gotta impress. I won't take any more and I won't take any less. I'm the queen in this, you know I got the finesse. Give me that, give me that, give me that. Give me that feeling. Bring it back, bring it back, bring it back. Like when we were young. Like when we were young. Like when we were young.
Bring it back, yeah, just bring it back. Sitting in the back, yeah, I'm rolling up some Trinidad. Feeling like the bestest, always got the best shits. Come around, baby, yeah, you knowin' who the best is. And that's just for the record, so y'all don't get it twisted. I ain't talking cheese, even though I'm buzzing, listen. You don't wanna miss it when you get the feeling. It'll make you feel explicit like a new addiction, baby, it'll take a hold. I know you're feeling cold, cause I've been feeling cool. You give me all these feelings that I used to have in school. These butterflies got me feeling light, like I'm floating through the air, hanging out like a satellite. Yeah, it's really got me feeling right. All around me, yeah, looking like a ceiling light. Hanging out with a hella glow. See me from the center of the earth with no time.